Helen Whitaker had spent 39 years learning how to breathe quietly so no one would notice she was drowning. Victor died on the 18th green at Pebble Beach at 4:17 p.m. on a Thursday, mid-swing, his tight lice still soaring as his heart exploded. The caddy said he looked almost relieved, the way a man does when the sentence is finally read. Helen heard the news while folding Victor's golf shirts, the ones she starched every Sunday night for 40 years. She finished the fold, set the shirt on the stack, and only then let the phone slip from her fingers and shatter on the travertine like ice breaking on a frozen lake. The funeral was held in the same church where they had married, where she had walked down the aisle believing love was a contract written in permanent ink. She wore the Edinburgh tweed coat he loved, the one that still carried the faint ghost of his cologne at the collar. She stood at the door greeting mourners, smiling until her face felt lacquered, her fingers so cold she couldn't feel the handshakes anymore. Michael took the pulpit looking exactly like his father at 32, tall, immaculate, the kind of handsome that made strangers trust him with their money. His voice cracked only once, perfectly timed. And there is one woman who kept Dad breathing when the rest of us had stopped noticing he was suffocating. Olivia Grant was the heart he turned to. Olivia, please stand. 400 people inhaled as one living creature. Olivia rose from the front pew, the widow's pew, slowly, deliberately, like a queen accepting homage. Black cashmere dress cut just low enough to remind the room she was still alive in every way. Victor had stopped being with Helen. A single diamond pendant. Helen recognized it. She had chosen it for their 30th anniversary, rested exactly where Victor's lips used to brush when he still kissed her goodbye. Helen felt the floor liquefy. The reserved card with her name on it had been removed. Someone had peeled it off the chair and crumpled it into a pocket. She was now a stranger at her own husband's funeral. Michael whispered something to Olivia. Helen saw her son's lips shape the words "thank you," and watched Olivia's manicured fingers squeeze his in return. The gesture was intimate, practiced, proprietary. Helen's lungs forgot their job. She sat very still, counting heartbeats the way she used to count Michael's when he had asthma attacks at 4. Her hand on his narrow chest all night long, terrified each breath might be the last. That night the house screamed with silence. She took off the tweed coat and the collar button snapped off in her hand, small, round, final. She laid it on Victor's empty chair like a coin for the ferryman. The refrigerator hummed. 6 bottles of his bitter imported ale stood in formation, sweating. She opened one, drank half in a single swallow, and vomited into the sink because her body still remembered she hated the taste. She did not sleep. At 3:12 a.m. she found herself on the floor of Victor's study, clawing through files like a woman digging a grave with her bare hands. She found the policy at 4:03 a.m., the original whole life rider they had signed the week Michael was born, the one that said in plain English, in the event any future beneficiary change is effected through fraud, undue influence, or concealment of material facts, the original beneficiary designation shall remain irrevocable. Victor's spidery note in the margin, for Helen, always. She pressed the document to her chest and cried then, ugly, animal sounds that tore her throat raw, because it was proof that once, for 5 minutes in 1991, he had meant forever. The solicitor's reading was scheduled for 11 a.m. At 10:57 Helen walked in carrying the policy in a plain manila folder. Olivia sat beside Michael in the front row again, legs crossed, one patent heel swinging like a metronome counting down Helen's life. When the solicitor announced that every asset, the Kensington flat, the vineyard, the 8-figure portfolio, now belonged to Olivia Grant, Olivia did not gasp or blush. She simply turned to Michael and smiled the small, satisfied smile of a woman who had already redecorated in her head. Helen waited until the solicitor finished, until the room was swollen with pity and second-hand embarrassment. Then she stood. Before anyone leaves, she said, and her voice did not shake, It was the voice she had used to negotiate multimillion-dollar reinsurance treaties before Victor convinced her motherhood was a higher calling. There appears to be a prior irrevocable rider. She laid the policy on the table like a loaded gun. The solicitor's face went the color of old ash. Olivia's heel stopped swinging. Michael made a sound like a man who has stepped on a nail and hasn't yet decided whether to scream. Page 2 of the rider contained Victor's handwritten codicil, dated 3 months before his death, witnessed by his cardiologist and the night nurse, who had watched him cry after his last stress test. If I have transferred assets to conceal an adulterous relationship, every such transfer is void. I was not of sound mind when I allowed fear and vanity to overwrite 39 years. Forgive me, Helen. You were the only risk I never should have hedged. Olivia stood so fast her chair crashed backward. This is coercion, he was medicated. Helen looked at her for the first time, really looked. Olivia was 38 and terrified, the way Helen had once been at 38, terrified of aging, of being replaced, of becoming the woman in the tweed coat with cold hands. The nurse recorded the dictation, Helen said quietly. She emailed me the audio file the day he died. He cried when he said my name. Did he ever cry when he said yours? Michael lunged across the table, reaching for the policy as though he could make it disappear by touching it. Helen moved faster. She pressed both palms onto the pages the way she used to press them against his fevered forehead, when he was small and the world was too big. Don't, she warned her son, and the single word cracked like a whip. Don't you dare protect her with the hands I taught to hold a pencil. Michael froze. For one heartbeat the little boy looked out of the man's eyes scared, ashamed, reaching for the mother he had just erased. Outside, the Pacific fog rolled in, thick and wet and merciless. Helen walked out alone, the policy folder clutched to her chest like the only child she had left. She did not look back when Michael called her name, when Olivia began to scream, when the solicitor started frantically dialing the fraud division. She walked until the fog swallowed everything behind her. Then she opened the folder, removed the original photograph stapled to the policy, Michael at 3 days old, eyes screwed shut, her finger in his tiny fist, and let the wind rip it from her hand. The photograph spun upward, a white bird against the grey, and vanished into the sky. Helen kept walking. For the first time in 39 years, she did not once look over her shoulder to see if anyone was following.